and welcome to Backyard Farmer. I'm Kim Todd, and we're happy you could join us for another hour of good gardening. If you have questions, our phone volunteers are waiting for your call, and that number is 1-800-676-5446. We'd also love to see your pictures on a future show, so send us an email to byf@unl.edu. We do need to know where you live and give us as much information as you can so we can answer your question very well. Also, please check out our YouTube channel and our Facebook page after the show so you can keep up to date with Backyard Farmer all week long. So Jody, you brought little things in boxes.
Yes, we'll try to keep them contained. I brought squash bugs. We are having a lot of calls about these because the squash is coming in really well, and so are the bugs. So I've got, I don't know if you can see, I've got some
beautiful eggs.
Egg clusters here on pieces of the leaf. So what I do when I see the clusters, and they're normally laid like, I guess the average is like 20, but you can see there's some that are more or less. They can be on the top of the leaf, under the leaf, by the veins, on the stems. They can get pretty tricky. But it's important to know that when you start planting squash, you gotta start like maintaining and keep up to date, scouting your squash. If you can pick these eggs off of the plant, then it will prevent, all of these little nymphs from feeding on your squash. If you are out there, you may actually see some adults, and I think I've got 2 females in here because they were actually laying when I caught them. These are some squash bug adults. These are dead. These are ones that I vacuumed actually off the plant using a battery-operated vacuum. So when you see these and the nymphs are smaller and they, out of these eggs, will just scatter. So that's why I use the vacuum. You can also, dump them into a bucket of soapy water. But the eggs are gonna be all over, squish those. It's about the whole entire life cycle. At the end of the season, the adults overwinter, and so you wanna clean up the garden. Also, another form of like IPM would be planting some, it's the blue Hubbard squash is their favorite, and same with squash vine borer and cucumber beetles. If you can plant that on the edges or out further from your garden, they will attract them, and you can treat that plant or scout and kill the bugs there. So get out there and just keep doing that.
Excellent, thanks Jody. All right, Rock, irrigation.
So I brought a sprinkler head only to jog my memory about what we probably ought to spend a little bit of time talking about. Right now, you can see the obvious shortcomings of your irrigation system because we've had a prolonged drought and no water, so it's really showing up. So that's a great time to walk your system, run it during the day, because normally you'd run it at pre-dawn or early morning. Run it during the day for those of you that have in-ground systems. Also with the in-ground system, there's a temptation during this weather to really pump the water to the system, but with our soils, if you pump the water, most of it runs off, so let's be a little more conscious of that, and if you do need to water more frequently, but still daily irrigation is probably not a great idea, even now. If you've been following our lead and not having your system on automatic, then certainly your roots have gone down deep and you're going to be better off. But if you've been on an every other day or an everyday system, certainly you're going to want to continue that during this prolonged lack of precipitation. But take a look at your system, walk around, put a flag in because you don't want to work on your system now because it might go down south while we're in the worst part of the year. Wait till it cools off later next week, and then go in and fix those heads that you've marked as having a problem or the valve box that you've had a problem. So irrigation is really a great thing to have in the ground, but doesn't come without some maintenance.
Thank you, Rock. All right, Lauren, what do we have?
I brought along a spinach leaf tonight from my garden, and a lot of our viewers have yellow nutsedge, and they may try to control that. And as we get a close-up here, you can see a lot of little leaf spots on my spinach leaf, and you can see how it's pretty uniform but just kind of spread all over. And some people might look at this and think they had some sort of a bacterial spot disease or fungal disease on their leaf, but in fact this is just drift from Lauren's over-aggressive action to try to control some yellow nutsedge.
Oops.
That maybe went a little awry. So this is PPO, herbicide injury, and you can just see the little burnt spots. You can also see injury that won't necessarily be as round and little spots spread out, but from just water on these high temperature days with full sun. So Just a couple things, not disease, but just for diagnostics and to remind everybody to be careful when they're out there using their herbicides, and I need to remind myself sometime now.
Excellent. All right, Kelly, you have the beauty on the table tonight.
I do. I have the pretty one. That some might argue, but I just brought a combination of annuals here. Annuals, we plant them every single year, and a lot of color. They're really just starting to hit their peak, and they're going to provide a long season of color. And so I just kind of wanted to remind people that they're great to take. We use them in containers a lot, but they're really great to take and tuck in here and there. I have a lot of perennials, but perennials kind of move around and die here and kind of move a little bit, so I have bare areas. It's just great to tuck in a lot of different annuals. You have to plant them every year, but they're not really that expensive, and you can just do a lot of different things. So this is Snapdragon is a yellow one, Salvia, and then there's a Dianthus here.
Excellent. Thanks, Kelly. All right, Jody, first round of questions. First one comes to us from Lincoln. Great picture on this one. It's whose eggs are these? Is this a good bug or a bad bug?
Okay, so these are an egg cluster from stink bugs. I can't really say which species, but maybe you know if you've seen them emerge. Depending on what is around or what kind of host plants you may be growing, could be a good or bad bug. It's hard to say. It's usually about the situation and the population. This amount on that plant is probably not bad, but if you've got like a garden and they're, brown marmorated stink bugs or something like that. So it depends. The good bug, bad bug.
All right.
The stink bugs.
Your second one, Carlton, Nebraska. Bugs in squash, gradually killing zucchini and patty pan squash. She's used 7 on them. Is there something she can use, and will it also kill her melon plants?
Okay, so these are the squash bugs, what I showed earlier. 7 does work if you can contact them. The nymphs, it's not going to affect the eggs, so you're still going to want to pick those off. They will affect the cucurbits, but mostly the summer squash and zucchini is what they like the most.
All right, and your next one comes to us from Wayne, Nebraska, and it's this yellow insect that keeps coming to the butterfly house. Good bug or bad?
It's a cucumber beetle. If you've got cucumber, then it's bad. A lot of times, they have many different host plants, so in a pollinator habitat, they're not too damaging. But yeah, cucumber beetle. And butterfly houses, butterflies don't really go into the houses.
Okay, all right. Rock, you have 2 pictures on this first one. This is La Vista. Weedy nasty grass came in about 8 years ago. She has a good description here. She's pulled and pulled. She's tried a Bermuda grass control with little success.
Well, it is Bermuda grass. We can tell it from zoysia grass because Bermuda grass has a folded leaf and zoysia grass has a rolled leaf. But that aside, this is Bermuda grass, extremely aggressive. One of the top 10 weeds in the world, according to the Weed Science Society of America. Extremely invasive. You just have to be persistent with a glyphosate-based product. Wipe it down, by protecting your hand, but then having a cotton glove on, with a plastic glove. Cotton glove and just wipe it on there. Be persistent, and ultimately it doesn't spread by seed in this part of the world, but it can continue to be, so you want to get on this right away.
All right.
This is Bermuda grass.
Okay, your next 2 pictures come to us from North Platte. Started showing up in his backyard this year, fast growing. When he mows in a couple of days, they're twice as tall as the bluegrass. So what do we think?
Well, so if you look on that picture, in the smaller grass is bluegrass. I can tell that that's bluegrass. And this looks to me like corn seedlings. I'm surprised that they're growing back after they're mowed. But if they have a feeder, and they're feeding squirrels, they'll often move the corn and the corn seed and replant it. I have it in my yard because we have a neighbor that feeds a lot of corn to the squirrels. So I'm guessing it's something like that. It should mow off with persistent mowing. If it continues to grow, then we probably need to go back and look at it again. But I'm pretty confident this is corn growing from a feeder.
All right, and one more picture here. This is Omaha. She has a 25-year-old white pine, had lower branches removed. She's been doing some interesting things like pouring tea leaves into the cracks, dug it up. She can't get turf to grow under here. What are we gonna say?
We're gonna say you can't get turf to grow under there.
Exactly.
Because the soil is acidic, which is part of the problem, but it's also looks like a heavy clay. It's cracking. You can't get enough water on it because the pine tree is a white pine, right? The pine tree has a shallower root system. It's going to be sucking up that moisture. So you're probably never going to get grass established under there, and you can take that as a challenge and see if you can make it happen. But I'm going to suggest. And she mentioned something about growing vinca, and it just hasn't established. I would still mulch that under there and quit trying to grow grass.
All right, thanks, Rock. Okay, Lauren, 2 pictures on this first one. This is a Dwight, Nebraska viewer. Leaves on zucchini and cucumber she's describing as pebbled or mosaic-like. They're in separate gardens, and they're not affecting the production of the fruit.
A couple things. If these are individual plants that look like this, which is what I suspect, this is a virus infection, probably squash mosaic virus. You would want to rogue those plants out so it doesn't spread. If all the plants look like this, I would wonder if other vegetables in the garden would possibly have a herbicide drift, because viruses and herbicides can look a lot the same. It just depends on the distribution in the garden. It's just one, they'll rogue it out.
All right. Your next one comes to us from Ida Grove, Iowa. She wonders what is on this tomato plant.
And this is interesting because when we see growths like this, we tend to think crown gall on tomato, but it really doesn't look like crown gall to me. And I looked quite a bit at this, and I don't know what else it is. If it's possible that if it's the only plant like it, I would rogue the plant out. If several plants look like that again, and there's growths like this, I think there could be some sort of a herbicide injury, and I don't know, Rock, if you've seen growths like that at bases, but it's not crown gall, but it looks like crown gall.
Okay, all right. And one more picture. This comes to us from Hickman. Blotchy tomatoes, should she pull the plant or pick the affected tomatoes, or what?
Well, there's a couple things. You can enjoy the beautiful multicolored fruit that's probably not going to be as palatable as what the fruit would be if it didn't. This is a plant that's infected probably with tomato spotted wilt virus, or one of our viruses. If you have other tomatoes, I would rogue this one out.
All right.
It's the only one, though. Just enjoy it.
You're having a roguing night.
Yeah, it's a roguing night. Rogue it out.
Going rogue.
Okay, Kelly, 2 pictures on this first one. This is a Hastings viewer. She says her linden looks like it's dying. The trunk in particular, I think we have a picture here. Is this a borer or what, and can she save the tree?
Okay, yeah, it does look like it's declining. It's kind of thinning. The foliage looked like it was a little bit off color. I don't think, it doesn't look like a borer to me. It's hard to, I always tell people if I could x-ray your tree or do an autopsy, I could maybe tell you for sure than an educated guess. But this may have been something from, the lawnmower hitting it over the years, many, many years ago, and just started to get a decay or something in there and started to decline, and is one possibility.
All right, 2 pictures on this next one. This is a Lincoln viewer. A quarter of his birch is turning light green, almost yellow. So planted 5 years ago. What do you think here? Okay,
well, it looks like a chlorosis because you have the yellowing of the leaves and the veins are a darker green, and river birch does. I do see chlorosis in river birch quite a bit. That isn't, sometimes it's in the lawn though, where you get a little bit too much irrigation, and that kind of, it contributes to it. It doesn't cause it, it contributes to it. And that I saw in a landscape bed. So just make sure it doesn't get too wet. You could try a ferrous sulfate treatment. It might have, there's a really clump of trunks. It was probably in a container. They're very tight together. They may be causing a little bit of issues. It's restricting movement or of the nutrient throughout the tree as well. And that may be why it's on one side.
All right, and one more question. This is a pawpaw. She says wilted leaves, not the whole tree, started on one side, now spreading, but the leaves don't die. They're just like that.
This looks like herbicide injury to me, which we just continue to see quite a lot of. So don't apply herbicides above 80, 85 degrees.
All right.
Be careful.
Thanks, Kelly. Well, for our first feature tonight, we're taking you out to some wonderful fields of purple. Lavender, that is. I met Jerry and Holly McCabe of Sleepy Bee Lavender Farm at the Farmers Market here in Lincoln, and they are going to tell us how they grow this finicky, fragrant flower here in Nebraska.
We started a little lavender field back in 2018, 4 years ago. Kind of struggled through winters and learning different things, but we've managed to grow a little lavender field in Nebraska. This is Nebraska. You can grow anything in Nebraska, right? That's not necessarily true. Lavender's a Mediterranean plant. It doesn't like anything we have about Nebraska. So we did some research. We found a specialized plant that was bred specifically for this area. It adapts to higher humidity a lot better. It adapts to colder temperatures a lot better. And it's called Phenomenal. And this is the main one we grow. It gets about 3 feet in size by its 3rd year. And it lasts for about 15 to 20 years. Lavender hates Nebraska, basically. It likes dry, rocky soils. It likes low rain, no fertilizer, all the opposite of what we have here. So we had to do a lot of amending to the soil. When we first planted, we added some limestone to get or limestone dust to get the pH right. We added some limestone rock or some pea-sized rock. You never want to add sand to clay soil or you'll get cement, so you got to get a little bit bigger rock in there. We also added some old horse manure to kind of give a little bit of better drainage to the soil. So we've got the limestone rock and the horse manure for the drainage. That really helps keep the lavender from getting wet feet. What lavender doesn't love is having their roots sit in standing water or still water. They get root rot. They're very susceptible to root rot, and that mainly is what kills most lavender plants in Nebraska. A lot of people can't grow lavender in Nebraska because they overwater it, and that's usually a lot of the times I find what the issue is. The other main issue is our winters. They don't love our winters. They like dry, warm climates. So we've found a variety in Phenomenal and a few other English varieties that we grow that will be able to withstand the temperatures down to about 20 below. And then we always use row covers, which is a heavy-duty like blanket almost that we put over the top of the plants going into winter, and that protects them again up to about 10 more degrees. So those are some of the main issues. We really don't have issues with deer or rabbits or bugs too much. None of that stuff really likes lavender. We specialized in another kind of niche. I mean, we're a niche market of lavender in Nebraska as it is, but then another niche we specialize, all we grow is culinary lavender. So lavender is an herb akin to rosemary in the mint family. So it can be used for all sorts of baking and cooking and all sorts of things. So we do the culinary lavender. We also have all sorts of bed and bath products. So candles and lotions and soaps and just many, many different things, pillow mists, all sorts of fun things that you can use around the house, on your body, for perfume, for scents, for just smelling wonderful and relaxing with the lavender.
So thanks to Jerry and Holly for showing us that farm, letting us know that lavender can be grown in Nebraska. And Kelly, you said there's another farm out by York. So it's just that it doesn't want to live in most people's gardens. All right, your turn, Jody. This is one picture from a viewer in Omaha. White pine branches, powdery substance like lint on a 50-foot white pine. What is it?
Yeah, it's like snow. It's pine bark adelgid. It's kind of like an aphid-like insect that produces this wax as protection, and really healthy trees will not be affected by it. So if you don't really like it, you can like spray it with water.
Okay, perfect. You have 2 pictures on this next one, and from more than 2 people. Magnolias, of course, tiny white circles, and then all the shiny sap and all the black.
It's magnolia scale like every year, and with a lot of the magnolias that we have around here. So these scale insects are one of the biggest scales there, and they produce this honeydew, and then the honeydew drips down on things below the plant and creates city mold. So that's what that is, and I believe it's not their tree, right?
Right.
So, or one of the
Somebody
viewers.
else.
Yeah, and so it's really hard to get the city mold off, so it's really important to try to treat the tree when the crawler stage is evident, and that's usually in late summer, September.
Okay, so keep watching for crawlers. And one more picture. This is a viewer who wants to know if she can leave the bees in the tree. Woodpeckers made a hole, squirrel made a home. She put a mesh over it, and here came the bees.
Oh, well, because then they're protected. So yeah, these look like they're trying to escape the heat and humidity. So if you've got all these things living in the tree, it's an indication that there's some hollow places in there. If you want to know, it really depends, I think, on where it is in the tree, right? I guess. Horticulture person. So, right. So if you're worried about it, maybe contact an arborist, but it seems like they're happy there.
All right, thanks, Jody. Okay, Rock, 3 pictures on this. These come to us from Downingtown, Pennsylvania. So contractor regraded the yard, used contaminated grass seed. A few months later, here comes this. He cannot figure it out, and he wants to know what it is and how to control it.
So this is prairie cupgrass, and it was difficult for me at first because it was very similar to woolly cupgrass, except I didn't see the presence of hair in it. So I didn't even know prairie cupgrass existed. So kudos to the viewer for sending 3 great pictures, and we're able to identify it. It is an annual. It can be extremely invasive, prolific seed producer, but the good news is most of the pre-emergents will work on it. So in the landscape, something like preen, and in the lawn, any of the crabgrass preventers should do a pretty good job on it.
Great, thank you. And then you have 2 pictures on this next one. This comes to us from Norman, Oklahoma. They pulled it out last year from the roots. It came back this year, and it's 6 feet tall.
Yeah, it's Johnson grass, which is unfortunate for the homeowner. I mean, I want to be sympathetic, but it's extreme. The rhizomes on that thing are as big around as your thumb. It's extremely aggressive, extremely invasive, so they need to get on it with multiple applications of targeted sprays of glyphosate. Would do a pretty good job in the landscape bed, just keep the glyphosate off of everything else.
All right, thanks, Rock. Lauren, 2 pictures on this one. This is a lilac, and she said these patches appeared on the bark last year. The plant is 8 years old. Prior to this, new growth turned brown. This year it's perfect. The blooms and new growth were fine. And in the back and forth, they're not dead. These are not dead twigs.
Yeah, and I find that interesting because when we see that type of fungal growth, which that's just the saprophytic fungus that's growing on there, not exactly sure which one, usually that's an indication that the bark is dead or dying and it's working on decomposition. So I would really be surprised if these larger branches were not something that they will die over time. I mean, they could add a borer. There's many things that could have happened to stress that branch, and probably just doing some natural pruning to take those larger branches out over time and being selective on that, I think would be a good idea.
All right, you have one more picture here, and this may not be yours, but peach pest in Waterloo. So what do we think here?
A few things this could be. It's not a disease that I'm concerned about. It looks more like maybe bird injury, or it could have been some insect feeding initially. So if you have birds targeting that, and then secondary fungi can go in and start growing and cause a fruit rot, you'll just want to look at that and see if you go inside, maybe you have some insects, and then that would be a Jody question.
All right, and don't eat the rotten spots.
No, preferably not.
Right. Kelly, you have 1 picture on this one. Mm-hmm. This is a papillion viewer, found this plant at Walnut Creek Lake growing wild. Mm-hmm. Planted a handful of these a couple years ago. It flowered this year. He wants to know what it is, and then is it something he should cultivate?
Yep, this is a blackberry lily, which isn't a lily at all. And matter of fact, they've recently done DNA sequencing, and it's an iris. It's a type of iris, or it's more related to iris anyway, which is kind of interesting, the naming of plants. But yeah, it's kind of a short-lived perennial. There's this leopard lily is another common name for it because of the spots. But it is a nice one. It's called blackberry lily because when the fruits dry down and kind of open up, it looks just like a blackberry. So if you like it, I'd go ahead and cultivate it and keep growing it.
It does. Those seeds do spread. So
yeah, that is true. Thank you, Kim.
A lot.
Make sure you like it.
Exactly.
Or some people will prune out the seeds once they open up and you see what looks like a blackberry. If you go in and you snip them out, you can kind of hold it back a little bit that way.
All right, thanks, Kelly. 2 pictures on this next one. And this is, he wants help identifying this plant, and it's on walking trails in their pasture. So this is actually in a native landscape. Okay. Tiny white flowers on stalks in the spring. He thinks we have some in the BYF garden, and he's right.
Yep, this is our native. It's called pussy toes because of the kind of fuzzy leaves as well as the shapes of the flowers. Those little white flowers, probably more than anything, they kind of look like the pads of cats. Mm-hmm. So yeah, pussy toes, one of our natives, and a nice ground cover.
And you thought perhaps a little lamb's ear, right?
I did. When I first looked at it, I thought, no, kind of looks like a lamb's ear, but not quite. So and Kim helped me out with pussy toes.
Right, silvery fuzzy. All right, and one more. This is a Niobrara question. And she says, is this plant good to have in a flower garden? Came up, didn't plant it.
Okay, this is whorled milkweed, and it is one of our native milkweeds, but it is probably the most toxic of the milkweeds, so that is something to be aware of. You wouldn't want it growing, say, in a pasture or a hayfield or something such as that, because even though cattle usually won't graze it because they don't like it, they have to be really hungry. It doesn't take very much for it to be deadly, and it can be even dried or in hay, it can be deadly. But if you don't have an issue with that, it is one that pollinators will come to and will benefit from.
All right, thanks, Kelly. Well, before we go to break, let's take a few minutes to give you an update on our garden. Terry's got another fantastic All-America selection for us with a really fun name. Here's Terry out at the Backyard Farmer Garden.
This week in the Backyard Farmer Garden, we're going to look at another fantastic performing All-America Selection 2022 winner. This one is a petunia, and it is called Bee's Knees. It is a beautiful yellow, has not faded, one of those really deep yellows that really will work in most containers. Like I said, has not faded. This one is an annual, of course, here. It has a mounding trailing effect, so it's going to look great on the sides of those containers, kind of hanging down. It's only going to get to be about 8 to 10 inches tall, deep, solid yellow. This one has performed well all summer long. It is a vegetatively propagated one, so one that you would not be able to start from seed. You're going to actually have to find it in the nursery trade or online, but I really suggest trying this out for your containers next year. So check out and find Bee's Knees Petunia and stop by the Backyard Farmer Garden and check it out.
Right now it is time for lightning. All right, Kelly, are you ready?
I'm ready.
This is a Bellevue viewer who has tomatoes growing in like water trays, or not hydroponic, but in containers. They're getting BER, blossom end rot. She wonders if she can increase the vitamin D by crushing up 600 milligram tablets into the watering trays.
Not that I've ever heard of.
All right.
I don't think so.
We have a viewer who has a weeping purple redbud. The top of the tree did not leaf out at all. Can she wait till next year, or should she go ahead and prune that out?
Well, if there's still some green tissue in there, you can wait, but the part that hasn't leafed out will not leaf out again next year.
All right, this is a Ralston viewer who has garden tomatoes and peppers. Do they need to be watered every single day in this heat? They are in the garden.
Yeah, no, very little needs to be watered daily. Just when you do water, try to water deeply. For vegetables, that would be about 6 inches, maybe 8 inches.
All right. We have a viewer that has endless summer hydrangeas that they're not blooming, or they're barely blooming and then turning brown and dropping. This is Omaha.
I'm going to go with heat. Endless summer sometimes can be endless bummer, but yeah.
All right. And we have a viewer in Broken Bow who wants to transplant 4-foot tall trees this fall. Something to do now to get ready.
Nope, just keep them watered.
Okay.
So they're not drought stressed when you go to transplant them.
Excellent. Nice job. Okay. Are you ready, Lauren?
Yeah, I'm always ready. I always talk about food, but I can't get olive loaf off my mind tonight. So, when's the last time all of our viewers had olive loaf?
Never.
Amazing food. It's a staple.
Okay.
God. Help us.
All right, we're done. Okay, this viewer from Omaha wants to know whether baking soda is a really good remedy to use for tomato diseases.
I wouldn't recommend that.
All right. We have a viewer who has a lot of roses, and they're in the same bed as one that had rose rosette. She removed that one. Can she protect the others from getting that disease?
Well, roguing the plant out is the right thing to do. The other thing is just be careful that you clean your pruners, hopefully, and just watch for any other symptoms and make sure you rogue that out if you're seeing more.
Okay. Viewers are wondering why we have so many slime molds this year, and why are they in the same spot every year?
What an amazing thing. I mean, this is a great year. Slime molds are everywhere. They're always in the same spot because they have little spore type structures that they'll be there and they'll reoccur usually. Okay. We have some awesome pictures of slime mold coming up later.
Okay, we have a viewer who also has roses. They have dark blotches on the canes. She's wondering, is that rose rosette or not?
Not necessarily the dark blotches. Roses, we see a lot of black spot on rose, and that can form some spots. So making sure if it is something that's defoliating the plant, in the future, I would recommend a fungicide application. Particularly hybrid tea roses are very susceptible to this.
All right, nice job. Okay, Rock, you ready?
Not as much as Lauren, but I'm ready.
Okay, this is a North Bend viewer who wonders about using a water-retaining polymer on the lawn.
We've tested those polymers and they really don't work. The water isn't released at a level that will really help the plant. The only place we've seen it work is in container plants.
All right, a Gage County viewer wants to know how to control sandburrs in the lawn.
So post-emergent, before it starts to seed, you can use any of the Clencroc type products. Pre-emergent, you can use pendimethalin or other products, but you got to apply it really late because it germinates late.
All right, this is an Ida Grove, Iowa viewer who wonders how to remove the purslane carpet. She says even her chickens won't eat it.
Yeah, purslane, the trouble is you leave any piece behind that has a node on it or a segment of leaf, and it'll re-sprout. So you've got to either herbicide it, which is not really easy to do because it doesn't really react to herbicides, especially now, or get it all out of there before and not leave any behind.
All right, Tenacity is pet safe. Is it okay to spot spray crabgrass when it is this hot?
It's a little warm yet. I'd wait until we get into the 80s later next week.
All right, nice job. Okay, Jody. No, you're not going to lose the lightning round. All right, this is a Fairbury viewer who wonders whether she should burn her squash and pumpkin vines to get rid of the squash bugs or compost them.
If there are bugs in them, I would probably burn them or discard them.
All right, we have a Lincoln viewer who wonders why there are so many staghorn beetles this year.
I haven't seen any, but if there's stag beetles, then there's probably rotten wood that fell down maybe in a storm.
Okay. We have a West Point viewer who wants to know whether cornmeal is a good grub control to use in flower beds.
I'm going to say no.
All right. We also have a viewer who wonders whether the big green June beetles are the ones that are emerging from those quarter-sized holes.
No, those are probably cicada killers.
Okay. We have a Nickerson viewer who has 30 mums in their greenhouse. One of them has sticky leaves covered with sawdust. What kind of insect probably in a greenhouse?
Sticky leaves covered with sawdust. Well, where's the sawdust coming from? There's got to be wood somewhere. I don't know. I guess I failed.
White flies or something. They just think maybe. Who knows? Nice job, all. Nice job, all. All right, Kelly, plants of the week.
Okay, this is a beautiful white bouquet, and white is a pretty bouquet. This is a not purple coneflower, a white coneflower called white swan. We're used to seeing purple coneflower, but it's an echinaceae. So a nice perennial for the garden, and then the smaller white one is chamomile. And this is one that can reseed, kind of keep coming back from reseeding. Some of them are annual, some of them are perennial. So
right.
White swan, coneflower. It's hard not to say purple coneflower, and chamomile.
Yeah, and that chamomile, it actually will seed itself into like the bricks in a patio. It's kind of cool, really.
It's a tough one. Both of them are pretty tough.
Rock's giving me the eye. He must not
And so
like
not supposed to grow in cracks in the sidewalk.
Well, it just depends on your sidewalk. All right, you've got three pictures on this first one, Jody. This is one that comes to us from Council Bluffs. What is this and how does she treat? She thinks it's whitefly and she's spraying it with a homemade insecticidal soap.
Okay, so it looks like on one of the pictures there's definitely aphids. One of them also looks like there may be spider mites on them, but what I'm concerned about is the homemade insecticidal soap. So the insecticidal soap that you get in the store is potassium salts of fatty acids. Sometimes people will use dish soap or something from household, so that may not be safe for the plant, so there's that. But that also could be, I don't think they're whiteflies, but some, if you see those exoskeleton, which may be the sawdust from the last picture, that's aphids.
All right. This is one picture on this one, and then another one that is very similar. So these are both Lincoln. This is eggplant. Plants are well watered, get afternoon shade. What do we think? Seward County and Lincoln.
Yeah, this one's not looking so good, and I can see tiny little shot holes that have been, the little pits have been made by eggplant flea beetle. So they're really tiny, they've got really big femurs, so they jump, but it's pretty detrimental to plants when they're very young. So I don't know if this one is a pretty susceptible cultivar for that. You can, in the future, do like a surround as a kale and clay. That they can spray on there and reapply if it rains, but that could be a repellent, or maybe some row covers in the future.
All right, and I think you have maybe one more eggplant picture, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, so this is the Lincoln one.
Yeah, this is a pretty severe infestation of aphids and a lot of the exoskeletons there. So, rinse this off or wash this off, and then if they are still coming back, maybe an insecticidal soap for that.
Okay, and two pictures on this next one. This is from Wymore. He actually has two coneflowers. One looks good and the other one looks like this. So there's the plant and there's what's happening.
Yeah, so the flowers still look good. It's the leaves that look bad, and that's caterpillars. So those are checker spot butterfly caterpillars. So caterpillars, they're hungry and they're going to eat, but they will turn into beautiful butterflies if that's any consolation. So, good for the pollinators.
All right, thanks, Jody. Rock, one picture on this one. What are these vines that seem to sprout overnight, attach themselves to shrubs?
That's honeyvine milkweed. It is good for pollinators, but it's the least preferred of the milkweeds. So when it gets into a garden like this, I'm going to actually suggest removal or control. But it's in among a bunch of other broadleaf. You can usually control it with any of the broadleaf herbicides. So I would start snipping that off at the base as soon as you see it. Because it won't repropagate from that, and it is an extremely aggressive grower, as the viewer said.
All right, one picture on this next one. This is a Bennett viewer, and this spiky thing has soft needles on it. Gets more mature, and the needles are just terrible. He's tried glyphosate. He's tried digging it. It regrows really fast.
Yeah, it's greenbrier. And it's a member of, it's a huge genus. It's a huge genus of a lot of different materials. They can be woody or herbaceous. I'm going to guess this is probably, well, I'm not going to even try to guess based on what's in front of it, but it's definitely a greenbrier. And I'm surprised they're not getting some control with glyphosate. Hand pulling is obviously out of the question. I'd just be persistent with the glyphosate.
All right, and one question on this one. They have been fighting this one forever. What is it? They've tried 2,4-D, digging, putting pulled plants in a bag. From June to September, they thought they had it. Is there a pre-merge? So what is this and what to do about it?
This is puncture vine, and many of the prodiamine is pretty good on puncture vine and as a spring application. This one's flowering. You certainly don't want it gets a burr on it called a goat head, and it'll attach to everything, including the bottom of your bare feet, with excruciating pain. So don't let it get to this point, to the point where it's going to start putting out heads and spray. But 2,4-D is probably not strong enough. Use a 3-way type herbicide, the dicamba, unless you've got woody species nearby, would be my best bet if they're willing to do that.
All right, thank you.
They'll even pop bike tires.
Oh yeah.
That's terrible.
Much less your toes, right?
Bad.
Okay, two pictures on this one, Lauren. This is a little bit of a head scratcher.
I think we're looking at
this is
milkweed.
yours. This is your milkweed, sorry. This is milkweed, so this belongs to you, Rock. And she's wondering, she wants to keep the milkweed. She wants to turn this into a landscape bed. But then she's also wondering how to keep it from going into the turf where she doesn't want it.
Yeah, and this is common milkweed, extremely rhizomatous, very aggressive, and it will move into the yard, but it really doesn't tolerate mowing. So if they're mowing on a regular schedule, it should keep it out. If they really wanted to spot spray it, would be a problem because it's going to translocate back to the milkweed. And kudos to them for growing a great monarch and other pollinator plant. So good for them, but don't be spraying it in the lawn. Just take it out by mowing.
All right, now Lauren, your turn. This is interesting. This is Cosmos, and We've gone back and forth on this one. The ends look like they might be developing buds, but they look like this, and not all the plants are doing this. What is this?
Yeah, I thought this was really interesting. So Cosmo's it's in the Asteraceae, and I think this is a phytoplasma, possibly. So if they just have an individual plant with this, again, it's rogued out night, I think, on all my questions, it seems like, but I would take that out or enjoy it. But if you do enjoy it, it may spread to other plants in your landscape.
All right.
I think it's a phytoplasma.
Okay. We've had a lot of basil questions. You have 3 pictures on this one. First time he's had problems with it. Any idea? He's never had this before.
Well, there's a couple things I couldn't see close up, but I question if there weren't, something going on with spider mites or something, just the way the general yellowing was and the lower level leaves being impacted. I don't see something that is a disease. Now, if individual plants are wilting at all and you're seeing these yellow leaves on the bottom, that could be an indication of a root rot, but I really couldn't tell of a significant disease issue from the pictures.
All right, and that was Underwood, Iowa, by the way. Forgot that part. Okay, and this one is Sac City, Iowa. Multiple tomato plants that have quickly wilted from the top down, and he shows us this picture and then the foliage here on this one.
So a couple of things. We have seen quite a few viruses in tomatoes this year. And if the new growth is wilting and dying and the rest of the foliage is healthy, it could be a virus. But that said, if the whole plant is wilting, I'm questioning if it's not one of our fungal root rots, like a fusarium wilt or something like that. If these plants, when you have one that is dying or close to dead where you know you're going to take it out, you could simply take that plant and just kind of cross-cut the stem towards the bottom and see if you see any brown streaking in there, and then you would know you're most likely dealing with a fusarium wilt. And then you can look for resistant cultivars or varieties in the future.
All right, thanks, Lauren. Kelly, 2 pictures on this one, and this is a pumpkin or a watermelon, or what do we think this is?
Okay. Didn't you call it? What did you call it?
I called it a waterkin.
A waterkin. Yeah. It looks like a watermelon in this picture. It looks more like a pumpkin in the other picture. And if you had cross pollination, I didn't think pumpkin and melons could cross though.
I didn't either.
So I mean, pumpkins can cross with squashes and things like that, and I think the different melons and maybe cucumbers can cross. But I didn't think you could get a cross, so I'm not. Unless somebody else has a better suggestion, I'm not really sure why you've got a weird fruit there.
All right. So this next one, 1 picture, 2 sets of cukes, and they're doing this. This is a Columbus viewer, planted them in a raised bed. What do we think this is?
Well, it's odd. I wasn't really sure, but I think one of the next pictures coming up gave me an idea, and it could be fasciation, and because it looks like there's a lot of clump of flowers, and they kind of look like they're fused together, and that's the only thing I can think of in this case. And there's really not much you can do. There's different reasons they do that. It can be genetic, it can be environmental, it can be a virus.
All right, so your next 2 pictures come to us from Omaha, and this is growing out of the middle of our yellow squash. So
fascinating.
There we go.
Fasciation again.
Yeah.
So, and again, that's just kind of an abnormal, usually fusion, and a lot of times the stem. It can be the flowers, as we saw earlier, but it'll get flat and it'll kind of look like a ribbon. And as I just said, there can be different causes. It's kind of fun to look at, but it's probably best to remove it when you see it.
All right, and 2 more. This is a cantaloupe in a container. Leaf growth has been outstanding, no flowers. She does have, I think, 1 picture in here. This is papillion. She's wondering if that is the start of a fruit.
Well, it doesn't really look like the start of a fruit. It might be, but yeah, I don't think it is. But when you grow them in a container like that, especially the soils get really, really hot. We've had really hot weather. You can get some fertility issues because you're watering a lot and it leaches out some of the nutrients. And it doesn't always work. It works well with some things, but with some varieties it doesn't. So I wonder, the foliage also looked a little bit pale green to me. And it just may be that you're not getting good pollination of those flowers.
All right, thanks, Kelly. Well, most of what we talk about and show you happens during the day. But as the sun goes down, you can really make a creative statement with the placement of a few lights. Here's AJ Coleman with McKay Lighting to tell us more.
Well, as a new homeowner, we always, when we're invited out to give them a lighting consultation, we always kind of start with the 3 rings. So the internal perimeter is basically the right outside the home, and so focal points, architectural features of the home. So your main entrance, kind of guiding your eye to the front door, architectural features like peaks and different things that you might want to highlight, brick, stone, those sort of things. And then we work outside that and focus on the landscape. So trees on either side of the house that kind of frame it up, and then pathway lighting to get guests kind of to and from the front door. And then the last ring is kind of the outside perimeter, more security driven, and highlighting those trees. And if they're large enough, we do some down lighting, kind of more from a safety thing. So those are kind of the 3 rings that you would consider lighting. In today's technology with LED, everything's a LED now, is all based on color temperature. So if you go to a big box store to maybe experiment with solar lights, they're only going to come with one color combination, and it's typically 27K, which is a warm white. We like using 3000K. It's a little cleaner, but it's still in the warm hue. You don't have as many options typically from a big box store. They'll call it daylight white or soft white, that sort of thing. But color temperature is kind of where LED first started, and that's something that you'd want to kind of pay attention to. And then it's kind of evolved from there, where you get kind of fancy into colored LEDs for seasonal things, and then even rotating colors. Some of the new technology out there is phone control and through an app that's controlled through the transformer. So everything that we install is low voltage. It's a wired system, but you can have wireless control through your phone. And so whether that's a module that plugs into the transformer or a signal, so there's some different control options. We do a lot of switching for customers, but for the most part, most people just want it dusk until dawn because they're used to their lights. They just want them to operate. Solar would be a great way to kind of experiment. If you're coming from no lighting experience at all, solar is a great option because it's not really well made for duration, but you could play with some uplighting on a tree or a pathway and not knowing specifically what you want to do, so you don't invest a lot of money in it. And then once you have a good idea, then you would go into what we would install or what we would sell is a wired system. So it's low voltage cable that's buried, and that's the most reliable out there right now. There's new technology coming, but those would be the 2 main options.
There are so many options out there for people to try, and that good lighting really doesn't have to break your budget either. You know, we've got hundreds of great video features as well as complete past programs on our YouTube channel. We do hope you'll check it out. Make sure you hit the subscribe and notification button so you can keep up to date with all the content we offer. We also have great announcements of cool things in the gardening world. Lincoln Ira Society Rhizome Sale, July 30th, 10 to 4 at St. Andrew's Lutheran Church here in Lincoln. Our second one is the Science and Ag Family Field Day, Wednesday the 3rd, 9 to 3 at the UNL Haskell Ag Lab in Concord. We have a couple of things on the screen so you can get more information on that. And our third one is East Campus Discovery Days, Saturday, August 13th, 10 to 2, East Campus Mall, Discovery Days, unl.edu. So great fun. All right, last round of questions here. So Jody, your first one is a identification of this particular moth, which she said was large.
Oh yeah, this is a 5-spotted hawk moth. So this is what those like tomato hornworms, tobacco hornworms, they look like this as adults.
Okay, so cool and interesting. How about this one? This is Platte River State Park.
Yeah, this is a katydid nymph. So they turn into, some people call them like like mimics. They look like leaves when they're adults. It's got little wings, it's a nymph, and it looks like a female because it's got that ovipositor at the back end.
All right. Your third one is, saw this on the back patio. Is it a red velvet ant or wasp? If so, is it solitary or will it hurt her Great Danes?
It's solitary. If the Great Danes go after it, it does have a painful sting. They're called cow killers. They have not killed cows, and they're around because they actually are parasites of bees and other wasps.
All right. Another one here is an ID. And this, what is this one? This is Concord.
Okay, this is a rove beetle. So it's an interesting beetle because it doesn't have complete wing covers. So they're kind of short, but it's, I guess, in the terms of good or bad, it's a good guy, ground beetle, predator.
All right, and one more. These guys are hanging around the house, constantly trying to go into small holes on the step railing to set up a dwelling.
Okay, so this is actually a European paper wasp. So this is one of the social wasps that have those little paper nests like an umbrella. The ones that you're talking about, those sound like cicada killers that are also yellow and black and are ground nesters and flying around quite often right now.
Excellent. Okay, Rock, 3 pictures on this one. This is several pictures of spots in a bluegrass lawn, 12 inches in diameter, southwest Omaha, insects, disease, or what?
I think this is bird injury. They peck around looking for a critter. They pull up shoots and stuff, and then they just desiccate. See them mostly in the heat.
All right, that's pretty simple. Then we have a Valley, Nebraska viewer. 2 pictures, recently relocated. They're seeing this spot in the fescue. Turf doesn't pull up. It's sort of this weird white color. What is it?
Yeah, so it's not a mildew. It's not downy mildew. I'm thinking that this is actually earlier injury, probably from billbugs, except billbugs don't attack tall fescue. So this is one we need a little closer look at it.
All right, and one picture on this next one. She's wondering about what this is. No dirt was brought in. What grass is this? How does she get rid of it?
Looks like a pile of crabgrass to me, and pre-emergent in the spring.
All right, excellent. Lauren, you have a whole bunch of ID too, and this is shroom time.
Awesome.
So your first one here is Omaha growing on a linden tree in the Millard area. What is that?
That's a slime mold. It's interesting. We see a lot of our slime molds that are smooth, but this is actually just producing little fruiting structures, and that'll be real dusty.
That's really cool. All right, next one, rural Sarpy County, huge mushroom came flying out. What is it?
Unfortunately, that one I can't say. It's got a lot of surface mold on it, and it looks like an older one, so not sure on that one.
All right. Third one here is these shrooms grow in the yard from midsummer to mid-fall. What are they?
Be nice to have a picture of the underside. I think it's going to look spongy, and if it is, it's an ash bolete.
Okay. And then this is all the way out at Scotts Bluff, coming up in the turf.
It's a type of haymaker mushroom, so these can be toxic. So I'd just be careful if you have pets.
All right, and 2 pictures on this next one. This is Glenwood, Iowa, and that's a size 13 shoe.
That's dinner. So
not the
no,
shoe.
Yeah, not the shoe. No, this is a sulfur shelf mushroom, and also called chicken of the woods. It is a little further mature when you find them younger. Sometimes people do. They are considered edible, but I would be very careful and just never really recommend eating anything that you collect like that unless you know what you're doing.
All right, Kelly, we only have time for about one of your questions.
Okay.
This is a Fremont viewer, has a polar blackberry bush that's 8 years old, blooms flowers, but the fruit never matures.
Again,
Wonders about the soil or...
my guess would be pollination issues. Again, with it could be the heat, it could be a lack of pollinators. The flower. And when it's really, really hot, the pollen won't stick to that stigma very well. And so then you don't get the fertilization of the flower.
All right. So, and by the way, if our viewers don't know, that has the name polar because it's a white blackberry, which is sort of interesting on that one.